Good morning, everyone. This is Father Nate, missionary priest in Italy, and thanks for joining us today, February 6th, on No Greater Light, our podcast on Marian feasts and Marian meditations. Well, to start us off today, we'll head to Belgium, where we celebrate Our Lady of Louvain. This is a painting, and the abbot Orsini writes, "This virgin, in high veneration in that country, began to work miracles in the year 1444." Right? So, what's the story of this image? Well, St. Peter's Church, or Sint Pieters Kerk, in, I guess, Flemish, I don't know, don't quote me on that, is the oldest church in Leuven, Belgium. It was founded around 986. The first church burned to the ground, that happens, but then the present Gothic-style church was built or began construction in 1425. Both world wars were not helpful. In 1914, the roof and the nave were burned down, and in 1944, the north aisle suffered bomb damage. What's important about this church, though, is that it's the home of Our Lady of Louvain, or the Virgin of Louvain, right? A statue of the Blessed Mother and her divine Son, also sometimes called Sedes Sapientiae, or Seat of Wisdom, right? Our Lady of Louvain was a wood statue of the Blessed Virgin carved by Nicolas de Bruyne in 1442, which is a facsimile of an earlier statue dating from the 13th century. Unfortunately, the statue was completely destroyed during the Second World War, not by fascists, but by Allied bombs, right? It's a replica of Bruyne's famous statue that's currently on display in the church, right? Now, Sedes Sapientiae is a specific title for the statue of Our Lady of Louvain, right? It's also a typical image that we see in Christian iconography, right? The Blessed Mother sits upon a throne with the Christ child in her lap, right? It's said that devotion to this began as early as the 13th century, right? And the Blessed Virgin's feet oftentimes are shown resting upon a stool, right? Interesting, and for good reason. The Seat of Wisdom is a title to Mary that we'll recognize from the Litany of Loretto, right? It's St. Peter Damian, who in the 11th century said of the Blessed Virgin Mary that she is herself that wondrous throne referred to in the Book of Kings, right? What is he talking about? Well, he's alluding to Solomon's throne, right? The throne of the king that's renowned throughout history. He's known for his wisdom, right? We're told in the Book of Kings, it says the third Book of Kings here, which must be an old reference. I think that's maybe First Chronicles. Also, don't quote me on it, that his throne was ivory overlaid with the finest gold. It had 6 steps, says the Bible, and the top of the throne was round behind, and there were 2 hands on either side holding the seat, and 2 lions stood, one at each hand. And 12 little lions stood upon the 6 steps on each side, and one on the other. There was no such work made in any kingdom. Yes, right? Interesting, too, that Mary is descendant from that noble lineage of David, right? As the Mother of God, she is the seat of wisdom, the vessel of the Incarnation. She carried and gave birth to the second person of the Trinity. And so she is, in a certain sense, the throne upon which God himself reigns from, right? And one last little tidbit, this symbol, the Sedes Sapientiae, has become the seal for the Catholic University of Leuven, right? It bears the motto, Universitas Catholica Louvainensis Sedes Sapienza. Catholic University of Leuven, seat of wisdom. Then we'll jump down south to the Piemonte Etneo in Catania, Sicilia, in Italy, where they celebrate Madonna del Fuoco, Our Lady of the Madonna of the Fire, right? Why? Didn't we just have a Lady of our Fire? Yes, but this one stopped lava in 1865, right? When the statue processed to its edge, right? They usually celebrate the feast. The solemnity is the first Sunday in September, right? But why do we celebrate? Why are we talking about it today, February 6th? Well, on February 6th, 1865, if you read in the archives of the shrine, we find that what happened? There was a sudden eruption, and so lava started coming from these mountains, right? And it reached their area and threatened the village of Venna, right? It was less than a kilometer from the sanctuary. Right? Obviously, people freaked out, but they were good and fervent Christians who didn't lose hope. They had recourse to Our Lady, the Almighty Mother of God, and they carried in procession towards the lava that was proceeding, threatening death and destruction, not only the holy icon, but also a wooden statue of the Virgin herself, venerated in the sanctuary, right? The evening twilight descended on the earth, and the reddish reflections of that immense and incandescent river of lava formed the sky in that stretch like a lake of blood, right? The reverend, who had preceded his faithful, climbed onto a protruding boulder, which served as a pulpit, and from there urged once again, amidst the sobs of himself and the faithful, to repentance and trust in the prayer of Our Lady. Suddenly, a furious wind rose, in which terrifying vortices crawls out over the burning lava until it hits the statue of Our Lady, making her face red hot. Right? After a few moments, calm returns, and with the calm, the lava, as if stopped by an omnipotent and visible hand, stops at the moment. Right? The great miracle, a great and undeniable miracle, had been achieved. Right? That statue from this day was called the Madonna del Fuoco. Right? So last but not least, we come to Madre de las Almas Consagradas in Carrizales, Miranda in Venezuela. Okay. So on February 6th, 1993, 3 nuns of the Servant of Jesus convent, along with a family who had come there to pray, saw the Virgin in the chapel garden on a banana tree from evening until morning, radiant with bluish light. The next day, the garden was covered with silver frost. The following day, a similar substance of many colors indicated this was all her presence, right? On February 9th, the same group saw the Virgin again in the garden when young Sister Maria del Carmen Contreras heard her say, "This is my title, Virgin Mary, Mother of the Consecrated Souls." Again, the vision remained until the next day, when likewise that frost-like substance appeared, right? In 1998, after a somewhat equivocal investigation that found no proof that anything supernatural had happened, but left open the possibility, the Bishop of Los Teques authorized public devotions at the chapel, right? The apparition site is a grotto where a well was dug at her suggestion, a garden with orchids and roses, and Stations of the Cross. So that's what we're celebrating today on February 6th. For today's Marian Meditation, taken from the book by Father Ildefonso Villar, we continue with our series of meditations on the words of the Magnificat. That's Mary's reply to St. Elizabeth. That's really a prayer to God, we could say, after the visitation, or in the moment of the visitation. Today we start meditation 34, and our first point is, because he has looked graciously upon the lowliness of his handmaid. Those are Mary's words. How marvelous and practical is the lesson of humility which Our Lady thus gives us. She has just been greeted by the angel on behalf of God. She has just been raised to the dignity of God's mother. She has just been blessed among all women by St. Elizabeth, and yet she pledges to lower herself in the depths of humility, stating that she is just a mere handmaid of the Lord. Thereby she tells us that whatever can be found in her is God's gift, since everything in her comes from that God who has looked upon her. And to look upon, in biblical language, means to watch with satisfaction, to look with good eyes, to be pleased with, and to love. So everything for her springs from that look of love which God bestowed upon her. Otherwise she would be merely one of so many daughters of Eve. Think deeply over all these words. Imbibe this truth, because if it is correct when applied to Mary, it is much more so when applied to you. What are you indeed, and above all, what are you in the presence of God? In whatever you have, what is yours and what is God's? Were God to demand back all that he has given you, and all that belongs to him in the order of nature and of grace, of earthly and spiritual gifts, of internal and external gifts, what would be left you? One thing and one thing only: sin. That is exclusively yours. The rest is God's. Cannot you, therefore, say that God has looked also upon you with good eyes, and has therefore filled you with good things, and has given you all that you possess? Learn then that much more rightly than our Blessed Lady, you must not only know, but practice humility, since this is the only just and rational attitude that you can take. Consider also how Our Lady shows us that the foundation of all the heavenly blessings and graces of God lies precisely in humility. That is why Mary says that she praises God and rejoices in her Savior, because he has looked graciously upon the lowliness of his handmaid. If you do so, far from praising yourself for any virtue or achievement, as did the Pharisee of the Gospels, who claimed so many merits for all his works in front of God, you, on the contrary, will at every instant acknowledge that it is the bounty and mercy of God which tries to raise you from dust and misery to the heights of sanctity. In proportion to your lowering yourself by an acknowledgement of your misery and by a hidden life of humility, God will lift you up. So for today's reading from the Admirable Heart of Mary, we continue with chapter 5, in which we are told wisdom and truth of God are mirrored in the Admirable Heart of Mary. If you remember, all of these chapters are about how Mary's heart is an imitation or a mirror of God's infinite perfections. Mary is rightly represented as clothed with the sun, says Saint Bernard, for she has penetrated into the profound abyss of divine wisdom more deeply than we can think or believe, to such an extent indeed that she seems to have become immersed in that inaccessible light, so far as it is possible for a creature who does not have a personal union with God. Since our incomparable Mother is in heaven, entirely absorbed in the ocean of eternal wisdom and knowledge, and as God has made her partaker of his empire and associated her in his divine kingship, establishing her as queen and empress of heaven and earth, and communicating to her his own dominion over every creature, so has God filled her heart with the light of his adorable wisdom, so that she may know all the subjects under her authority, and rule and govern every creature according to the necessities of each and the dispositions of the divine will. Our Lady possesses a special knowledge of those who are most devoted to her. She knows God's designs concerning them, the road they should follow to reach God, the state and dispositions of their souls, all the accidents that befall them, all their possible perils, the pains they suffer interiorly and exteriorly. She knows the temptations that assail them, the evil schemes of their enemies, and all their corporal and spiritual needs, so that she may assist, protect, defend, and strengthen her faithful followers, obtain from her divine Son the help they most need, and be herself the best of mothers to them. From this you can estimate the happiness and advantages enjoyed by those who make themselves worthy to be numbered among the true children of Our Lady's loving heart.
Hello, and we hope that you enjoyed listening to our Marian podcast. In the spirit of Saint Bernard of Clairvaux, we say to you that there is no greater delight than to spread the devotion of Our Lady. We hope you share these sentiments and encourage you greatly to share with a loved one. Know that you are always in our prayers, and we ask that you keep us in yours. God bless.